While traveling through Pennsylvania and Delaware to learn more about reforestation techniques, we happened to come upon the work of Mark Brownlee and team at ArcheWild and WildLawn. Now, initially, our goal was to learn about their American chestnut program, but we were fascinated to hear about their other rewilding efforts, including replacing traditional lawns with native grasses. That's something we have been exploring also at Flock. Now, after meeting with them, we felt compelled to see if we could do some experimental design work with them at Flock, which will be a subject for a later video down the line.
You do a lot of landscape restoration elsewhere, but it looks like after all this earth moving, you're going to be doing some landscape restoration here too.
We never have a chance to work here. In fact, one of the things that we do, it's a different brand. It's called WildLawn.
Okay.
And it's taking all of these ecological restoration principles and experiences that we have in forests and farms and making them available to homeowners. For people who don't want lawns, there's a lot of people who are really sick and tired of lawns.
I'm all of that, but I should have worn my Make Meadows, Not Lawns t-shirt.
That's been an exciting new thing. We launched that in 2019 in New York City.
Oh, fantastic.
At a big Goldman Sachs event.
So are you focusing more on like a meadow planting? Because I'd love to tell you what we're doing on our own, but I'd love to hear what you're focusing on as far as like the no lawn policy.
Well, we launched WildLawn with the assumption that everybody has a lawn and everybody wants a lawn. So we created a lawn alternative using native plants, and not your standard native plants, using plants that grow in the wild in the woods that most people have never even heard of. And have never been grown before. So a lot of the WildLawn plants are exclusive to us, at least for a while, until people figure out what we're doing.
Yeah.
But it turns out sedges are really challenging to use. Now I know that the internet's full of recommendations. Use Pennsylvania sedge, Appalachia sedge. They fundamentally don't work unless the soil and water and light conditions are perfect.
Yeah.
So they're not really suitable for everybody, but we have developed.
They might be suitable for us only because we have such wetness. So we have sedges growing everywhere.
Yeah,
and we've noticed them in our lawn.
So sedges can be really useful if you have the right conditions. But for the development that's across the way there, that was built a few years ago, a sedge type lawn just isn't going to work. So we use grasses, native grasses, that you mow once or twice a year, or not at all, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're actually testing out. So we took out, some of the sod because we needed to grade it anyway. And we started to, play around with, we're going to have to seed it again, but like Bouteloua, Gracilis, and a number of others that are lower that we could just perhaps just mow once or twice. And then another section of lawn, we actually did a bunch of bulb planting. So it's more like a Stinson style planting that you would see maybe in the Netherlands, for instance. But we're using the current lawn that's there, but we'd potentially reduce it. And we're just mowing paths now so that we could just mow the lawn less, but let it grow up a little bit. And then we've noticed another section of lawn that has a bit more diversity that I think probably came in off of the edges of the pond area, and it looks a little bit more wild. And we're like, okay, well let's grow out, and we'll just mow the edges and the pathways, and just test these things out, because we couldn't find a lot of people who are testing these things out. But it's nice to know that you're venturing that into that.
Yeah, we're very much a research-oriented organization, so. We're evaluating new species all the time. We're approached regularly by outside organizations. In fact, we were just contacted by a company in California to grow Danthonia spicata on a commercial scale, because it can be useful for a native, low mow, no mow lawn. But again, the conditions have to be just right, but there are no commercial producers.
Right, and actually that would be a perfect grass in our drier, rockier areas.
It would, yes, it generally performs pretty well. But in suburban environments, because we're in Philadelphia, those kind of techniques and those kind of plants really aren't that effective. Because most people aren't wanting meadows. They want a native lawn.
Right, that their animals could run in.
Their kids can play in. That's right,
absolutely.
So that's what WildLawn does, but it's also interesting that even though we thought that everyone would want these native lawns, it turns out that more than half of the people that we talk to that call in, don't want lawns at all. Like they just want almost to reforest their suburban properties with like shrubs and flowers, because they want to walk through something. So that was unexpected, that people, just normal people, want to rewild their properties.
Yeah.
And this was not the case even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't find a homeowner that wanted to rewild anything.
I think
But now
maybe
it's
enough people
changed dramatically.
read like Doug Ptolemy's book or something
Or
like
watched
that.
your videos.
Oh, yeah. Either or, you know, or
But
sometimes
something
it's reiteration.
something has radically changed
Yeah.
in the last 5 years, just the general public's attitude, which is good for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
so
is great.
WildLawn is a special service that we are actually engaging other people with to promote and make available in their own communities. So well, she's not here, but Alex Morrison runs WildLawn for us. And she's talking to a woman in Maine, somebody in Boston, someone in DC who want to take the WildLawn concept and product line and the service offering into those communities.
That's
because
great.
we can't do that from here.
Right, and then also there's like so many different regional.
Yes, and the plants and the
Shifts,
soils, everything's
yeah,
different. So,
absolutely.
So the WildLawn has to be regional,
Yeah.
and that's what we're working towards. So you wanted to see greenhouse stuff?
Yeah, it would be great. Great
Okay.
to see what you're doing. And is this all what you're doing propagation-wise yourself?
Yeah,
or-
so so we support very large projects mostly for the federal government, large land trusts, state agencies, and ourselves. So, you know, every year we probably grow and plant 500,000 trees and other things.
Yeah.
So what we do here at this facility is focus on the hardest part, which is getting the seed in, conditioning it, and then germinating it into a size that then we can send out to either our own other places or to partner organizations to grow them out.
So you're growing them into plugs?
Yeah, they're very
Okay.
small plugs. These are all starter plugs. Basically the whole facility here is just focused on the management
Yeah.
and the germination of seed for a wide range of species that other people don't even have access to because they don't know where they grow. You can't buy a lot of the seed commercially.
And what is some of the stuff that we're looking at actually?
Well, these are probably, this is just a common plant, Chesmanthium latifolium, but it's not from commercial seed. This is from the most northerly naturally occurring population. It used to grow along the Delaware, but doesn't anymore.
So you're really taking like regional seeds and, you know, almost like an Ernst seed kind of, like, do you know Ernst?
Oh, we're very familiar.
Yeah, so they do like more the bioregional seeds and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and then-
so what they started with that concept of offering like northern latitude seed to
Yeah.
northern latitude customers in southern, we've taken that concept to a much finer degree. And I'll show you. Each of our products, all of them, carry, and we're famous for this, carries an accession code. And what that accession code does a lot of things, you know, for botanists, scientists, ecological professionals, you know, landscape architects and gardeners, they don't care. All right, this is really for people who do this for a living. So the first part of the code is the USDA symbol name, specifically not just for the plant, but for the specific species and variety and subspecies for that thing. So, because that's really important for professionals. For example, Asclepias tuberosa, which is that orange butterfly
the orange
milkweed.
butterfly weed.
Most people don't know that there is no such plant as Asclepias tuberosa.
I didn't know that.
It's a category
Okay.
of 3 different plants.
Because I just got one recently that's an Asclepias tuberosa that's primed for clay.
Yeah, yeah,
don't know.
I know. We've all heard of that.
Yeah.
And there's we can talk about that. But all of our plants carry the exact botanical variety that it is.
And is that like the botanical variety that you could see when you go to plants.usda.gov?
We
That's
use
code
the
that you
USDA nomenclature
Got it.
for
Okay.
that, so that anybody can look up that code
Yep.
and see exactly what plant it is. So for like Asclepias tuberosa, is it tuberosa, is it Rolsei, or is it interior?
So
makes
is it like
huge
a
difference.
variation of or a form?
It can be formas, varieties, or
Okay.
subspecies. So anyway, that's what the first part of the code says. The 5017 is a license plate. It's a serial number that links to our database. So we have the largest private plant community and plant location database on the East Coast. And we have data sharing agreements with NatureServe. So we have really high quality research data. So
Yeah.
for this one, this is accession 5017. So that's our 5,017th, not seed collection, but location that for this plant. Okay, so what that does is it allows us to trace plants all the way from their mother population, which might have been cataloged 5 or 10 years ago, all the way through production, so that when customers get it, they keep these numbers because they show up on sales orders and invoices. So they have a permanent record of where those seeds exactly came from, and who collected it, and what the site conditions were, everything.
And then who's collecting these seeds? Is it you and your team?
Our staff does.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a large staff, actually.
I mean, do you go out on like sourcing trips? Like, I want to know how that happens.
We do. Yeah, it's unfortunate Noah couldn't be here because he could explain that whole.
Yeah.
It's a very complex thing. We grow, probably 700-800 individual species per year, and each one of those requires seed collection, and they have different times, and so on. So that code, that 5017, says that this Chesmanthium latifolium is from Maryland, and from a very specific location in Maryland. So we can grow theoretically 10 different types of Chesmanthium latifolium, in this case, all from different locations, and keep track of them all perfectly because of these numbers.
And would you, when you're actually going out and doing your ecological restoration in certain areas, if somebody is, say, not in this area of Maryland, would you be able to use this, or would you use this? Would you even recommend it if somebody's in, say, 2 states over?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for certain types of customers, so we have a strong customer base in Buffalo, and in Maryland, and in West Virginia, and Long Island, for example. So those customers really want their own plants. They don't want plants grown from, say, Ernst Seed or some commercial seed vendor. They want somebody to go out into their environment, collect seeds, grow the plants so that they can use those plants. And that's our general model. So we work very closely with land managers and restoration firms, including our own, to make sure that, or to provide appropriate genetics for those projects. Our single biggest genetics program is for the U.S. Forest Service in West Virginia. So there's a vast number of plants, maybe we'll find some in here, that only really grow in West Virginia. No one else will ever buy them. Right. They're not useful. Like in your farm in the Finger Lakes, they wouldn't even grow there because it's a completely different environment.
Right. Yeah, and that's you're kind of alluding to the fact that, like, trying to grow as locally or regionally specific as possible, that plant is primed for.
Yes, I didn't answer your question. So for areas where we have a strong presence, we self-support, we support those regional seed collection and growing programs for the customer base. For other customers, if they want a local plant and they can't find it anywhere, and they come to us saying, well, do you have, say, whatever plant that's where the seed was collected in Baltimore County, say in Maryland. We'll look and we'll say, no, we don't, but we have this crop from, say, across the border in Pennsylvania, or this crop that was sourced in Virginia. Is that suitable? So we don't make the decision for the client about suitability. All we can do is say, this is where the seed came from. If you think it's suitable, then you can buy it. If it's not suitable for you, we totally understand. If you can wait a year or two, we can go collect the seeds from where you would like it from and get the crop grown.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So it's very, very specific from
very
beginning
specific,
to
and
end.
it sounds like you have like kind of long-term contracts with some places.
Well, the relationship is critical. Yeah, we're not we're not a retail nursery. We're not even a typical wholesaler. Everything we do is based on partnerships. So yeah, this is a starter plug, so you would ask. So this is what we'll sell to other nurseries. This is Dolingaria umbellata, var umbellata. Most people can't get access to this seed, and it's pretty troublesome to grow. So for those other nurseries or other restoration companies that need this plant, but don't want to spend a lot of money, they don't want to pay the $1.50 or whatever a plug, they can buy these for 30 cents a piece.
Wow. And then just kind of grow them out a little bit.
Yeah, so what another nursery will do is they'll take, there's no trays in here, you've seen the deep 50 trays.
Yeah.
That everyone sells. So they'll buy this pre-grown, and just stick it in the pot, and in 3 to 4 weeks, it's ready for resale.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a great way for other nurseries to kind of get involved with our genetics program by just getting these things.
And how long have you been doing this program?
Well, we've been growing like this almost from the beginning.
And when's the beginning?
But kept it as a, well, the nursery really started about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Again, to support our projects.
Yeah.
The 200 has been a trade secret for all that time.
Yeah.
It was only last year that we agreed that we really want to help others gain access to what we do. So we decided we'd try to see if anyone was interested. The demand's been overwhelming. So we just finally took the lid off and said, all right, we have a 200s program.
Yeah.
Come buy what you need. So native plant sales, restoration companies love it because, there's 200 plants in here. And the cost of this tray is less than one tray of like your landscape plugs.
Yeah.
And rather than, most planters can plant maybe one of those landscape trays an hour, unless, if they're not accustomed to it. They can plant 2 of these in an hour. So your planting rate goes up 6 to 8 times.
So
and survivability is better too.
Do you have to grow these out, or can you just plop them right into the landscape?
That's what our own restoration crews
Yeah.
love these, because you can just plant these things out in mass.
Yeah.
And they all survive because, unlike the bigger plugs, this has a really low foliage to root mass ratio, which allows them to be planted directly all the way through the middle of June.
Yeah. We just have taken out an old, 7-acre nursery, and we want to turn it into a native meadow.
Okay.
And we couldn't get some of the seeds that we were even looking for.
Sure.
They just weren't available. I could potentially get something that was not necessarily regional. And when I was throwing seeds out there, I'm like, I have no idea. I feel like I'm leaving this to the wind.
It's everybody, yeah.
And being able to, and also the nursery had 100,000 tons of gravel put on it, so it's very gravelly.
Sure.
And I'm like, how am I going to be planting? You can't be planting big plants in there. You're going to be hurting yourself. But something like this
makes
seems a
it
bit
so easy.
more reasonable.
No,
Yeah.
it's remarkable.
Yeah.
The speed at which you can plant. Like if you're doing you wouldn't use these for restoration.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a university campus or a corporate center because they want to support native ecology, and you need to put in 50,000 plants. In fact, we're doing a WildLawn project in New York for the Tea Building. It's a 1-acre meadow build. The whole building has been completely renovated, and we're modeling a Long Island sand plain. So we've modified the soils to replicate the sand plain.
Right.
And we're planting, I think, 200,000 of these.
Wow.
And it'll only take us 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Unbelievable.
So anyway, yeah, this house is where we germinate seeds, and then what happens to the plant after this depends on the customer, whether they're direct planted or just going to be potted up.
Yeah.
This is a commonly sold plant. It's currently called Pacra aurea. And one of the things that we're doing, again, part of the whole research and science-based approach to this sort of thing, is prior to about 15 years ago, botanists recognized 13 different varieties and subspecies of this plant. And there was a period when certain people said, that's too many, it's too confusing. Let's just lump them all together and call them one thing, Pacra aurea. And that's done, that's a disservice to people like you, probably, and us and our customers, because they want the right plant, not a generic plant. So what we've started to do is go and find those original 13, what was Senecio aurea, var, whatever,
Right.
and bring them back into production and give them new names. So this one we're calling, it used to be called Senecio aurea var gracilis. And this is the only Pacra aurea that's native to this region, to the Piedmont. So the new name for this, which we sort of invented, is Pacra aurea var gracilis.
Okay.
And we can sell it like this. So now people that like this plant here in the Piedmont can actually buy the right Pacra aurea and not the one out of the Appalachians that everyone else sells.
The Senecioni is like a genus that has really been blown up and recalibrated. But I could tell that if you're like, you're a splitter, you're not a lumper. You want to split them all out.
I've heard of that. We are definitely splitters because
Yeah.
we're trying to be accurate so that people can make intelligent, informed decisions about what they're buying and what they want to use where.
Right.
If we make that decision for them and say that they're not smart enough to figure that out, then we're not doing our job.
And
Our
what-
job is to inform and to make the right things available if people want it.
And what you're also saying is that it's not like, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution seed, particularly
No.
when it comes to locality. So
No.
that's what you're parsing out. Do you grow out any of this as well when you're doing?
Rarely.
Rarely. Okay, so you're planting with your little plugs. What happens when you're looking at shrubs and trees?
Yeah, we have some baby shrubs and trees. They start the same way. For growing out landscape plugs,
Yeah.
We'll just let somebody else grow them.
Yeah.
Because there's no magic to like taking a plug and sticking it in a pot and growing it out.
Yeah.
It's really not worth our time. We do some when we have customers that really want that.
Yeah.
We'll grow them. Yeah. But here, well, I guess this is all changed. Yeah, so here's an example. So they must have a customer that wants Solidago patula. No one grows that Solidago. It's a wetland plant, so.
But that's an herbaceous plant still.
Yeah, it's herbaceous, yeah. But yeah, so they are growing some 50s for somebody.
You're like, no one grows that plant. We grow that plant, but no one wants that plant, but we grow it. Somebody wants it.
Because it's a wetland goldenrod.
Yeah.
And who, other than a restorationist
Yeah.
or a botanist, I mean, who's going to buy a wetland goldenrod?
Right.
Well, when you need a wetland goldenrod,
Yeah.
you come to us.
Yeah.
Because we know where all the plants are. We go collect the seed for them.
I want to know if you.
I want to find you some trees or
okay.
shrubs down here.
I want to know if you grow out. I know I'm changing the subject, and we're still on trees and shrubs looking for that, but I want to know if you grow out parasitic plants to grasses that you would typically find in the
Oh, you know, like louseworts and stuff like that?
Yeah, or like a wood betony or
wood
like,
betony?
yeah. Or like a yellow rattle, a regional yellow rattle.
We can. We know how to do it, but nobody orders that stuff. Here we go. Let's check in here.
Well, what if I want to order that stuff?
Oh, yeah, okay. Squirrel cages.
Oh.
So what do we have in here? No, that's Asclepius.
Hold on a second. I gotta defog the lens. I don't know if this is the best thing to. It's a little steamier in this place.
The animals will just murder these things. So yeah, here's a shrub, and this is a great plant. Dilo, so that's Diarvilla linicera. And
So it's a native.
It's a native shrub.
A native honeysuckle.
Native
or?
honeysuckle,
Okay.
yeah. And this one came from northern West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So they're grown just like any other herbaceous plant. You condition the seed in a very specific way, and then you sow them. You'll see here that, and this is true for most native seeds, that they can have different germination events.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how the environment affects the genetic content of a seed, because the early ones will germinate, and then the later ones, and there could be 2 or 3 other germination events. So if you get
so these may still be germinating, or they may not.
No, they all will.
Yeah,
They all
okay.
will. So this is how the environment will strip out genes that are unsuitable for an area. So
Right.
if you were to plant these, say, up at your property, you could just sow the seed, and and this first flush came up, and then
Yeah.
you had that cold snap we just had last
Yeah,
week.
exactly.
All of these would die, but it
Yeah.
would be okay because the next one would come.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it actually benefits that you have this diversity in germination rates, perhaps.
Yeah, this
in
is
the
what our
landscape.
customers want, because they want the genes in the plant to be real. And then they get the full range of genetic diversity. But anyway, this is how we just start shrubs all this way too. It doesn't matter if it's a dogwood, a honeysuckle,
Yeah.
or anything. You just have the seed.
And then you also plant them as well, this way.
You
without
can,
growing.
you can. But
Yeah.
but generally for trees and shrubs, and we'll show you the chestnuts, but these generally do get potted up
Okay.
into those deep 50s.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are just a way to get the seed germinated under a controlled environment. And then after that, they just get potted up and they are grown up. We'll show you what that looks like.
Yes.
This is also your Dyer so you can see that code. This is from a different location.
Yep.
I think this one is from Mount Davis in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So after that, so it's different. That's how we keep track of everything.
Yep.
So after that stage down there, then you would put them here into something bigger.
And then they're coming out of the greenhouse, and would you consider this kind of like hardening off because they're in like a closed greenhouse, but it's the ambient temperature?
The plastic is really to control moisture.
Okay.
Plants need water to grow, but the fastest way to kill a native plant is to give it too much water. Absolutely. So they have to be covered. And then similarly here, these are Cornusumomum. So these would have started the same way.
So this is a nice native dogwood.
Yeah, this is something different, left over from last year. So
yeah.
These would have started in those little plugs, and then when they got to a plantable size, like what you saw, you put them in here.
So do you only grow out what you know you're going to sell?
Largely, yeah, because we work with partners. They communicate to us years in advance. Hey, I need 5,000 mountain ash collected from this mountain, or red spruce. I'll show you some red spruce. So we have these really close relationships. They let us know years in advance because it takes years to grow these things. You just can't. Yeah. It's not like going to Lowe's or Home Depot.
No, and I'm actually curious, and you don't have to. I don't want to pry too much, but your business model, since you have this relationship, if they say, "Hey, I want to do," you have to go out there. You have to send team members out there to go collect the seed. It's like this long-term. Are they paying on a project base, or are they, you know what I mean? Like, because they have to support it to the point where I have to go out, I have to collect the seeds. I come back, then I'm germinating them here. Then I have to wait, 2 long years, 3 years.
Well, it's this is why we have multiple aspects of our business. Some activities don't pay. Or they're not particularly profitable. So, but we support those programs and put the effort in because no one else is, and we can and we want to. But this is why we have WildLawn, and it's why we sell plants to other nurseries. So we found ways to fund doing the good work.
Yeah.
If you just did good work, we wouldn't be here because you can't support that by itself.
But you're doing good work, but as you're just diversifying.
We have to diversify, So here's an example, a red spruce. These were collected on probably Spruce Mountain, Spruce Knob, down in West Virginia. There's still a stable stand. So the seeds were collected, and same process. Collect, condition the seed, germinate it down there, grow it in increasingly large plugs until you can put it into a container and then you just let it grow. These would probably work at your farm too.
Yeah. We could take out our Norway spruce and
put in a red spruce. Yeah, that'd be great. For chestnuts, so we use a bunch of different boxes. They just built this box. Squirrels, voles, groundhogs.
Anybody would take
mice.
These.
Oh my Lord! You have to have Fort Knox.
Yeah.
If you don't, every one of those nuts would be gone. Literally overnight.
Is this enough of a Fort Knox box? You have a lock on it and everything.
Well, that's, well, you have to secure them.
Can we pick it up? Can we open it up just to see?
Yeah. But you'll see all the woodies are under wire mesh.
Yeah.
Of various types. They built this one because the plants can grow taller without having to move them.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Because when you use the shorter boxes, they work, but you have to constantly move them or add layers to the box, and it shades them. So
these are just like simple things that you don't really think about until you start growing them, and you're like, hey, wouldn't it be just smarter just to build a taller box?
Every year, we think we got smarter, and we learned not yet. So the nursery, anyway, they are huge innovators across the board. Growing technique, conditioning, collecting, labeling.
Yeah, it's very good to see
They just don't stop.
With their own eyes. There's all sorts of things. So you see it done in many different ways.
Yes, you do.
And this, I think, is a really ingenious way. It's just like a big, tall box.
Big, tall.
You don't have to move them.
It's root pruning because the little plugs are elevated, and then the box is elevated.
Yeah.
So
there's an air gap down here.
Yeah, there's an air gap. Yeah, there's an air gap there in the boxes on runners.
Yep.
And we like to put these kinds of trees. They're really aggressive trees. Chestnuts are really aggressive. on gravel, because even if they do get in, they can still be harvested. You're not breaking any of the roots.
Yeah.
And it's not an uncommon technique. It's an old-fashioned technique to sow, say, a swamp white oak, or sycamore, an alder, or a populus, even chestnuts in gravel. And you can just let them grow until they're 6 or 8 feet tall, and literally just lift them out.
Yeah.
It's called I forget the method.
Okay.
We don't use that because you need a lot of space. But you can just grow them in gravel and harvest them by root and then sell them.
Interesting.
Without any soil at all.
I'm like, I'm wondering now what the nurseries do that are kind of bag and burlap, especially in our area, because one of the things that has become more prevalent, we haven't seen it on our land, but the Asian jumping worm. And I wonder how that has an effect for nurseries that do grow into the ground and are kind of like grabbing.
Grabbing soil and moving invasive species. It's a major concern. And in certain states, I think it's Maine or Vermont, or maybe New Hampshire, they've just passed some very stringent rules governing the importation of balled and burlap material and even container material into the state, because they found that lesser celandine, Japanese stiltgrass, Japanese knotweed, the Asian jumping worm, other things are being imported all over the state and planted just because somebody wanted to save $10 per tree. And so they're starting to fight against that. And other states are too. Pennsylvania just banned for the first time in its history Japanese barberry, Bradford pear, and other things that are homeowner favorites, landscaper favorites, but are just devastating the natural environment.
We actually started taking out because it was an old nursery, old container nursery for 30 years, and he had planted a lot of the plants that wouldn't sell, or planted barberry all over. We started seeing bits of it in the forest. I was like, no, that's one of the first plants that needs to go.
It is,
But it was like, it was fashionable, you know,
it was.
20, 30 years ago.
But the results are devastating, and our projects teams, that's ArcheWild, the ecological restoration team, we have multiple project managers, and they're running 50 to 60 projects a year, some of them long-term. One of them is a forest restoration on 80 acres along the river, Delaware, where the very first step, and it's taken them 2 years, is just to get rid of the barberry. It was 80 acres of barberry. You could not take one step.
Wow.
And the barberry is tall as you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really bad.
And it's really hard to take out.
It is.
And also, if you just leave a little bit of the root in.
They can regrow.
Yeah,
so it requires
regrows.
a lot of initial pressure and then a lot of sustained pressure. We have some props set up if you want to see on the chestnuts. And we took an interest in chestnuts probably 40 years ago. My grandfather used to burn chestnut in his fireplace because he liked how it burned. And I don't remember how old I was, but somebody said, well, chestnuts are like extinct. Why are you burning them? And that's when I took an initial interest. So for this whole time, since I was probably in my teens, I've been passionate about the chestnut and finding them. So now we have documented locations of fruit-bearing trees throughout the East Coast. We know where they are. Maybe not where they all are, but we know where a lot of them are. But what we use for growing, I'll show you, are the result of a program, that's still somewhat active, that allowed private landowners to share pollen with each other. So if you had seed-bearing plants and I had seed-bearing plants, but we didn't know each other, we could trade pollen and create nuts with shared genes, all American, verified American chestnut. So these seeds, so these are conditioning boxes just for the chestnuts. So our seeds are grown, or the plants that we grow for sale and for reforestation are the result of those pollen sharing programs.
From various different landowners who had different...
Well, in our case, one of the parent populations, and it's well known, is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where there's a fairly large, intact stand of fairly blight-resistant chestnuts, and then another source.
And this is just in like vermiculite, or?
Yeah, whatever this is called. Yep, something like that. Yeah, so they're conditioned in here.
And what does conditioned mean?
Conditioning is the process by which you break down every, the germination inhibitor that's inherent in every seed, and that's all seeds. It doesn't matter if it's a grass or a bee balm or a tree. They have some mechanism that prevents the seed from germinating while it's still in the flower.
So it means like maybe you have to scarify it or stratify it or
Yes.
something of that nature.
There's a wide variety of actual conditioning techniques. Some are really easy, and those are the plants that you see commonly in the trade because they don't require anything special, maybe just a little bit of time in a refrigerator, a little bit of moist, that's common. But anything beyond like the really common simple things, those are the ones that nobody grows because the conditioning requirements are pretty stringent. So yeah, so what we do with a lot of woodies, not all of them, is we just hold them in conditioning for 2, 3, 4 years until they start to grow. So we're not wasting time or space on plants that aren't ready. So once they're monitored and we see that they start to put out their radicals is when we'll jump on potting them up.
Right.
So that's all that is.
Yeah, so then you would plunk them right into here.
Yeah.
Okay, after this.
Yeah, you just put them in there and then you put them.
And then you put that in an air pruning, or a root pruning.
In the critter box.
Yeah, in the critter box with the tall box.
Right. And then you just, then you just wait. They'll take care of themselves. Chestnuts are very aggressive growers.
And aggressive meaning they put out a lot of roots.
They put a lot of roots and they grow really quickly.
Okay.
The magic is getting the seed, conditioning the seeds. The seeds are subject to their own problems, like a lot of their own problems, rot problems, insect problems. And if you don't treat them right, then you have a whole box full of dead nuts.
And are you exclusively working with American chestnut, or have you done any kind of back crossing over those number of
We have never seen the need for going the Chinese backcross route. It's complicated. The record keeping is very challenging. Long-term participation of landowners is a problem. And we don't believe there's ever been a need. All chestnuts hybridize. We have the American chestnuts plus the dwarf, the chinkapin. Our chestnuts do show a little bit of the Castanea pumila genes in them morphologically. And those genes are probably lending some of the blight resistance that we're seeing. But there's no need to go Chinese. We see a long-term problem of planting a lot of Chinese chestnuts throughout the environment and then have, say, the new chestnuts coming along with the yeast gene spliced in that makes the tree immune to the blight. So now, in 50 years, when we're at the point where we can actually plant true American chestnuts out in the wild, we'll have these Chinese genes everywhere.
Yeah.
So we don't support that at all.
That's really good to know. It's great to hear different schools of thought.
Yeah,
on this.
it's a long-term issue to be planting Chinese genes.
Yeah.
For the American forest. Yep. So over here, we talked a little bit about soil. So chestnuts, there's a lot of things that'll kill chestnuts. There's a lot. So they're easy to grow in a nursery, extremely challenging to grow in the wild. But sometimes they're challenging to grow here. So because we grow unusual plants, and not just red maples and red oaks, we have to pay a very close attention to the soil blends that we use. And this is where the ecology team, on the projects interface with the nursery a lot, because they'll know that when they find American chestnuts in the wild, the soil often, if you look, has a consistent type of texture. That's why those trees are there and not someplace else. So when you're growing them in a nursery, it's at least wise as a starting point to build a potting soil whose texture and water holding capacity and pH and all of that closely resembles where the trees actually grow in the wild. So for example, here, feel these. These are all potting soils that we use, we make ourselves.
I hear in the case of chestnut that they like somewhere between a 25 to 75% sand, like a sandy loam type of feel.
Well, sand is a way of building a soil characteristic that's amenable to chestnut. Does it have to be sand? Not at all. I mean, there's different ways of achieving the porosity and the grain size. So sand, actually, for chestnuts, is a really good way to kill them if you have too much water, because the sand holds way too much water. So the grain size is too small, say, in this. Here, the grain size is is bigger, which is great, but holds way too much water. The fastest way to kill a chestnut is to rot the roots. So you can't use this, and you certainly can't use this for a chestnut. So what we have found is somewhere in between. So grain size too big, too wet, too small, too wet. So the nursery is using this texture, feel that?
Yeah.
And that's a very different kind of soil, where the particle size is a little bit bigger. You can still effectively water it, but excess water drains out right away.
So what do you recommend if somebody is placing a chestnut, they get one of your chestnuts, they bring it home, their soil is not quite like this. How would you do it? You would say, bless that soul, and let's see if all the hard work will pay off.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
We do.
yeah, you should.
Yeah.
Tony deals with this all
Yeah.
the time. Yeah, come on over.
Sorry, Kate. We do ask that we recommend that they get a soil test beforehand. We also have a habitat page on our website that explains plants that if you see them, it's a good sign that you could also grow a chestnut there as well.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to look at that list, get their soil tested, because you're right, we definitely don't want to be sending these out and then have them just die.
Yeah.
So Tony mentions part of the chestnut page. There's a list of plants that in the wild frequently grow along with chestnuts. So if you have 3 or 4 plants that are routinely growing next to a target plant, and the target plant requires a certain type of soil and water, well then all you have to do is look at the other plants. So if you have a lot of Calmia latifolia or wintergreen or black birch and other types of plants growing already on your site, there's a good chance you already have the conditions that are suitable for American chestnut.
Yeah.
But if on your property, say you have black walnut, silver maple, red maple, that's
A little more dicey.
You would never find American chestnut growing alongside those species in the wild.
Yeah.
So, but if you still want to grow them, what you'll have to do is modify your site conditions to make it a little bit more suitable for the needs of the chestnut.
Right.
Yeah.
This is all really helpful information.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Some people want to know, let's see, where we collect seeds from. This is a heat map. I guess we were at a conference recently. So the depth of the color broadly indicates
Where you're doing most of the
I think
collecting?
it's probably based on the number of accessions in inventory.
I see. Okay.
For a particular year. So I guess for this season, this would represent our range of seed collections, and the depth of color represents the proportions of where. So we really dominate the Piedmont. I mean that's where we are.
Yeah.
So most of our customers are from the Piedmont, which is just north of New York City, all the way down below, almost to Richmond, Virginia. So we're the epicenter for authentic genetics for the Piedmont, but also Ridge and Valley, so that includes West Virginia. So really no one is really focusing on the genetics of the Ridge and Valley, but we are.
You're in the Finger Lakes as well.
And we do collection up there because there are some great plants up in the Finger Lakes that you can't find anyplace else.
And a lot of native plant enthusiasts up there as well.
Yes. So anyway, that's that. I'm sure that in your journeys you've heard about Ecoregions.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a very useful tool. Kian is about to release a book, and he should say a few words. But he does talk about the role of this, which you can go online and see. It comes up from the EPA. But this is an invaluable tool for understanding where plants grow and where they don't, and why.
Yeah.
So, for example, we were talking about the Piedmont, which is this zone. It's extremely challenging to find American chestnuts growing actually in the Piedmont. Now, there are areas within the Piedmont that they can grow because they're not actually technically Piedmont. But the soil texture is too much clay, too much silt. The particle size is too small. And these types of soils hold too much water that encourage fungi that rot the roots. So it's very challenging to find chestnuts here.
And that was actually the first issue that hit
It was.
with chestnut, right?
That's what wiped out all the chestnuts. The first blight, it was a fungal rot problem, because chestnuts used to grow through this range.
Yeah.
But they were all wiped out with that initial push
Right.
out of the Piedmont.
Right.
So now all of the remaining chestnuts that are throughout, actually, are not in areas where there's that much water in the soil in the winter. So the chestnuts have been pushed into more well-draining environments, including Long Island, the Allegheny Plateau. There's some up along the Susquehanna, or the Delaware and the Hudson, quite a bit throughout the Ridge and Valley. So if you live in the Piedmont, don't bother buying chestnuts because you don't have the site conditions naturally. Meanwhile, if you're in this region and here, these soils have characteristics, just like we discussed, that are more closely resemble those required by the chestnut. So even this simple map can help avoid some pretty significant or costly, frustrating errors if you just pay attention.
And then, Kean, do you want to chime in on that as well? So you're releasing a book in regards to the ecoregions?
Yes. Well, it's not just in regards to the ecoregions. It uses the ecoregions map as kind of a core concept to build on this idea that we've been formulating for a long time, which is that the most important thing that you need to do if you want to find success in your native plantings is you need to understand the conditions on your site, and you need to understand which plants will be able to tolerate those conditions. And so using the soil as an example, the thing about these is that you're really not thinking of it as giving the chestnut what it wants, is you need to prevent the soil from killing the chestnut. And so if this soil will kill the chestnut, and this soil will kill the chestnut, then you need a soil that it can tolerate. And so the thing about the ecoregions map is that it just gives you so much information that you can use about the conditions on the different sites, because each one of these ecoregions corresponds to a set of conditions. And so if you're just doing your research properly, then you can find out, maybe O64C corresponds to a certain level of humidity in the soil, and a certain annual average rainfall, and a certain, proportion of light that it's getting. And that allows you to better understand the environment that you're dealing with. The book kind of builds on that concept of a constraint, which is a natural force that will kill a plant, and understanding the constraints of your site and trying to work around the constraints that are present is what will allow you to have a successful and sustainable planting. And so that's what the book is about, is just helping people understand how they can do the analysis themselves and the research in order to increase their success. But really what's more important is the core concept, which is just that you need to understand the inner workings of your environment if you want to know basically which plants will work and which plants will not. Because, you were talking about being able to change the conditions on, say, a property to support chestnut. Because if you want to plant chestnut, well, then is there anything I can do to make the conditions more suitable for that? And, as he said, there are temporary measures that you can take to maybe get chestnuts there for a little while. Say you're trying to produce some seed, it would be good enough for that situation. But these environments exist in this way for a reason. There is some natural force that made them that way, and eventually they're going to return to that natural state and start constraining your plants out of existence again. So really what it's about is knowing what you're planting beforehand, not changing your conditions afterwards to fit plants that maybe weren't the best choice.
It may be also why, it's become a little less fashionable to augment the soil when you dig a hole for a tree, not to augment the soil too much. It's to keep some of the soil that you have around it so the tree doesn't just grow in the nice cozy soil that you just put in.
Because eventually it's going to return back to that natural state, and
Right.
if you don't constantly put in the time and the effort and the money to upkeep that, then it's going to return to its natural state. And if that plant doesn't work in that natural environment, then as soon as you stop actively taking care of it, it's going to die, which is why choosing the right plants in the first place is a lot more important.
How do you both feel about the idea of understanding more of the microbiota in the soils, whatever it might be, the nematodes, the fungi, the bacterial mix? Do you get into that within your work and your ecological restoration?
It's fundamentally important.
Yeah.
That's one of the kind of constraints that people fail to consider a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So this is what it always comes back to, is there are constraints that maybe you don't think of because it's not necessarily obvious, but having the right microbiota is, one of the most important things, because if you have microorganisms that are going to kill your plant, then it doesn't matter kind of what else you do, that constraining force is there, and it will constrain the plants.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding that those forces are there is really important.
Yeah.
It helps prevent mistakes, well-intentioned mistakes. There's not much you can do about them, however, because the flora and the fauna that lives in the soil is not something that anyone is equipped to really fundamentally modify. Now,
Right.
you can do certain things. You can lime a field. You can lay acid on a field, sulfur. You can till it. You can add organic matter, and that will alter what's in the soil temporarily. And that's useful if you're growing corn or soybeans, and this is what farmers do. But in restoration settings, there's rarely enough money because you're not harvesting anything, so no one can afford to put a lot of investment into the soil to make long-term improvements. You're often stuck with understanding what you have and working within those constraints.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
This is very elucidating. I really appreciate all of the knowledge that you guys have shared and bestowed in just this short period of time. Very helpful, and it gives us a lot to think about. I feel like I saw a little bit of the picture, but you just like opened up the keyhole a little bit more.
That's good to hear.
We do. We have a specific niche.
Yeah.
Supporting science-based restoration and supporting other people who believe in that general approach of doing things right. What's interesting is more and more people now are paying attention to these sorts of things. So we used to be a fairly narrow set of customers, right? The USDA, the Forest Service, EPA. Now, our next door neighbor wants in. So it's a very exciting time for us.
Yeah, that's very great.
Yeah.
Well, I hope when people see this video, they learn more about your work, and some maybe even get inspired to actually do regional use, at the end of the day.
I hope so, yeah.
Because, you can't be there for everything, and it's hard for you to go and collect seeds in every single state,
Well, I think that a little fortune telling. Our belief is that this model, at least right now, is the best model that's available. I'm sure someone will improve it someday. But this model ideally should be replicated for each one of these ecoregions. Because the seeds are different, the soils are different. The people working on land will specialize in the unique functioning and attributes of those locations. So we do anticipate that this integrated model of land management, forest, farm, nursery, that whole thing will be replicated eventually across the country by ecoregion. So each ecoregion will have its own ArcheWild. Right now, that's not the case, so we're trying to support people all over the place.
Yeah.
But it'll grow to the point where you'll get these really specialized teams of people who master an ecoregion, and they'll be able to provide this service either themselves or through a small network.
Yeah. Do you go to herbariums and check out where things had been collected before historically? Is that part of your work?
Yeah, in fact, our nursery manager, we hired him from an herbarium.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because you have to love the plant. You have to have just an insatiable desire to understand why that plant is there and not anywhere else.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of plants like that, like Pennsylvania saxifrage we're growing this year. I mean, you cannot find that in the wild. And we found it actually not far from you. Growing on almost a vertical bog in a forest. So there's a road cut, so there's lots of sun, and water was just leaking out of the mountain onto this road cut, or the slope above the road cut. So it was completely saturated, like it was a pond or a bog, but except it was like this.
On a rock. Was it on a rock?
Well, sort of, yeah. There were rock outcrops because, the water's pushing all the soil away from rocks. But you have swamp plants, bog plants growing in a forest, including swamp saxifrage, which needs that combination of constant moisture and extreme drainage. So there's really cool stuff out there. So when we find it, it's not just, oh, look at that cool plant, and oh, let me get some seeds. It's doing the deep dive into understanding what is actually happening with the soil, water, and light. What's that combination? Because we need to know that for conditioning seed, growing them in the nursery, and then recommending to people whether or not something is suitable for their project or not.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I asked that is because so many areas have been so heavily altered that, you know, how do you find what had been potentially growing there at some point? Or, you know, do you have to look around and say, okay, well, this is your soil conditions, this is the type of microbiota that you have, this is kind of your ecoregion, your climate, and then I'm going to go out into these other areas to see, you know, plants that are growing in something very similar to that, even though your place has been heavily altered.
Yeah, that's when you get into that, that's when there's two things that are useful. One, knowing an ecologist. You know, we have several. Every place will have some. So networking through your Native Plant Society, you'll find local ecologists that understand the area well enough to be able to provide that local guidance, which is really important. There's another tool set that's coming online, not ours. It's with the U.S. No, it's with NRCS, and we're in early stages of discussion of partnering with them to develop what's called ecological site description. So these are state and transition models rooted in the ecoregion concept. So within an ecoregion, we can talk about like a Piedmont. Well, that's pretty big. Well, what happens if you're wet or dry or sunny or not? So the ecological site description, or ESD, is a standard way of describing where a site type might go given where it is today. And this framework is designed fundamentally to replace the need for a local ecologist in the moment. So if you have a local ecologist that is really familiar, say, with your mountain, how do we capture that in a way that somebody else can use in future generations? So this is a brand new framework that's being rolled out. We're going to be playing a significant role along the eastern seaboard, is where we are right now. But it could be really useful. But until that framework is available widespread, you need to find a local ecologist, because they generally will be able to look at what you have and say, this is where this piece of land is going to go. And they will use the weeds that they observe, because the weeds are an excellent indicator of your soil and moisture regime. They'll be able to provide guidance. You won't get the right guidance from the internet.
Yeah.
You won't get the right guidance from even plants people.
Yeah.
Because their focus is the plant.
Yeah.
And maybe the bird or the pollinator.
Right.
But to really get at what's possible and what's not, and particularly to understand why something is not working, is either an ecologist who's got that integrated
Systems
view,
approach,
the systems approach, or by Ryan Skian's book, because it does provide the foundational conceptual understanding that once you get those, like the ecoregion, like that's an easy concept to get. I mean, there's several others. But once I think anybody reads those, they'll be like, oh, well, that's obvious. They just never heard the words before.
Yeah.
Stay tuned here to Flock, as we'll be sharing more work in progress on the land in the coming videos. And do consider becoming a subscriber to the channel. It helps us grow the channel and document more great work of the people in and around the area. Plus, we're committing 10% of our Google AdSense revenue back into the community, which will be matched by our partners over at Espoma Organic. So by becoming a viewer and supporter, you're also helping the community here. Thank you so much from all of us, and we'll see you in the next video.